One of the coolest things about the Pokemon games is, unlike Final Fantasy or Shin Megami Tensei or whatever RPG series you might like, in Pokemon, you, the opponents, everyone plays by the same rules. All Pokemon have the same base stats, the same move pools, and it's up to you as the player to decide how best to arrange those things in order to win, and for some people, in order to win as quick as possible. Having said that, there are instances where the game doesn't quite do that, where the AI players are allowed to play by a slightly different rule set than you or I. And, I mean, there's no better word for it than it basically cheats. In some cases, this actually makes things a lot worse for it. In other cases, it makes it better. But in any case, it's kind of interesting to look at the times the Pokemon games cheat against the player. Now, unsurprisingly, we're going to start our conversation off in Generation 1. The generation that is held together by duct tape and dreams, or at least the programming equivalent of such things. Generation 1, the AI doesn't quite play by the same rules. For example, all our moves have power points, and when those moves are depleted, we can't use them anymore. If all of them are depleted, we have to use the move Struggle. The AI, however, doesn't have power points, and this can make things a little unfair. It means that Gyarados can just spam Hydro Pump forever, Hyper Beam forever, and everyone's favorite, Metapod and Kakuna, just using Harden forever. Now, to be fair, this is less a case of cheating and more a case of just trying to save some memory. Not having to keep track of the opponent's moves obviously saves on space, but this is the only generation that works this way, and from Generation 2 and beyond, all opponents also have power points just like you and me. But something else opponents can do in Generation 1 is they know what moves we're going to use, and they react to them. So I've talked about in my solo runs about retroactive potions, and I've given a bit of a description, but in case you missed that, and if you want a bit of a refresher, the way the AI uses potions in Generation 1 is completely different than the way we can use potions. In order to determine who goes first in a Pokemon game, there are two things to keep in mind. The first is speed. Which Pokemon is faster when you take into account base speed, modifiers, badge boosts, etc. The second thing to keep in mind is priority. Some moves, like Quick Attack, are in a higher bracket. So even if your Pokemon has the lowest base speed imaginable, if it uses Quick Attack, it always goes first. Unless, of course, the other Pokemon, which is faster, also uses Quick Attack. In later generations, this has gotten more complicated, and there's a whole chart of different priority moves. But one thing that has the highest priority of all, even higher than things like Helping Hand or Protect, are items. Items always happen right at the beginning of the turn. And in Generation 2 and beyond, this is true both of us and our opponents. But of course, in Generation 1, items do not work this way. Items work like their moves work, and do not have increased priority. Our items do, but theirs don't. And this is why I call them retroactive potions. Because in theory, both me and my opponent are supposed to select our moves, and then we get to see what each other picked. In Red and Blue, though, if the opponent is slower than you, it decides what it's going to do after you have moved. In other words, it's essentially retroactive since they should be deciding at the same time. Now, while this might seem like a massive advantage, and if the AI were better, maybe it would be, it actually ends up being a huge disadvantage. Think about it, in Generation 2, I deal a bunch of damage, the AI attacks me, and then before I can even move again, it heals. Now, I do a bunch of damage, the AI heals, and then I do a bunch of damage again and I can get a critical hit or something, making it a lot less likely the AI actually gets to attack me at all. Anytime a Pokemon is slower, I have that opportunity for a critical hit, for a max roll, something beneficial before it has a chance to heal. So it is cheating, but it's not a good thing. Speaking of cheating that isn't all that helpful, let's talk about one of the most famous illegal Pokemon, Lance's Dragonite. Lance's Dragonite knows Barrier, but Dragonite can't learn Barrier, like at all. This isn't even something Dragonite can now learn. Well, that's not completely true. There was a Dragonite released with Barrier as a special event move, but as a legitimately obtainable Pokemon, nothing in the Dragonite line could ever learn Barrier via level up, And similarly, they could never learn it via breeding, and Barrier has never been a TM. In fact, nowadays, Barrier cannot be selected in battle since it did not make it into Sword and Shield. Maybe Scarlet and Violet will bring it back, but it's not a terribly helpful move. I mean, Dragonite's already decently bulky, and the best way to damage it is with Ice Beam, which is a special move. But worse yet, because it's coded as a Psychic-type move, if you battle Lance either with Poison Pokemon or Fighting Pokemon, Lance will just spam Agility and Barrier the entire battle, meaning you have an easy, albeit possibly very lengthy, victory. Now, thankfully, while Lance does have 3 Dragonite in Gold and Silver, these Dragonite do not have Barrier, so they're all perfectly legal. Maybe Lance got that promotion in exchange for giving up his cheated Pokemon. Makes sense, right? Well, not exactly. This time around, his cheated Pokemon is actually really good. And this is his Aerodactyl with Rock Slide. Now, it makes no sense that Aerodactyl cannot learn Rock Slide via TM in Generation 1. But it can't. And Rock Slide does not make a comeback as a TM in Generation 2. From Generation 3 and beyond, Aerodactyl can learn Rock Slide, but those games didn't exist yet. From the perspective of someone playing these games in the late 90s, early 2000s, this Aerodactyl was just plain unfair. Consider that Rock is super effective against Ice, the type that is best against Lance, using a super effective move it otherwise shouldn't learn. Now, true, the fact it doesn't learn it is ridiculous, and yes, for the longest time Aerodactyl happily uses Rock Slide. Doesn't change the fact that back when we battled Lance's kids, he was again using a cheated Pokemon. Now, I know some of you are going to say, what about his under-leveled Dragonite? It's true. He has 2 level 47 Dragonite and a level 50 Dragonite, but this is okay to me. Why? Because nothing ever indicates that we are seeing the entirety of the Pokemon world. In fact, we know there are other regions and other games happening simultaneous to our adventures. And sure, some of the moves we don't have and some of the Pokemon we haven't discovered, but there might even be areas in Kanto and in Johto that we just don't have access to, but Lance does. And it's conceivable Lance found underleveled Dragonite. There are tons of underleveled evolved Pokemon in Gold and Silver. There's freaking level 3 Noctowls. There are level 7 Fearos. There are tons and tons of these things, so it is completely believable to me that he was able to catch those Dragonite at a lower level. Now, I realize the real reason this exists is because the game wants to be balanced, and they thought having 3 Pokemon at level 55 for that point would be a little too much for you to handle, but I think my way still makes narrative sense, and as we've seen in games like Sun and Moon, Let's Go, there are a ton of instances where we can catch fully evolved Pokemon that are underleveled. Now, to be honest, I could go on and on about Pokemon that either are underleveled or, like Price's Piloswine, no moves at levels they shouldn't. Like Fury Attack is not a move Piloswine can learn until 33, but Price has it at 31. I mean, again, I get why they did that, but not even really. Why not just have Piloswine at 33? But there are 2 more examples of the AI cheating that I really want to talk about. The first is one that has annoyed me ever since I was a kid, Earthquake Lantern. Earthquake is a great move. Lantern is one of my favorite Pokemon. Earthquake would be a useful move for Lantern. I mean, nowadays, Lantern has the hidden ability Water Absorb, so you can have a Water Absorb Lantern that covers for its electric neutrality by using Earthquake. Its attack isn't great, but hey, base 100 power, that could work. In addition, if you have the right team for it, Earthquake can be really good in double battles. And incidentally enough, my first competitive team ever, which sucked by the way, did in fact use Lantern in double battles. And I probably wouldn't have used Earthquake, but it would have been nice to have the option. There is no Lantern that has ever existed other than this one that can learn it. None at all. I don't know why a Lantern could learn Earthquake. Kind of just floats in the air. But it's a cool move. But it's not a move it's supposed to learn. No idea why this random cool trainer has this, but it's a thing. Now, originally this video was going to conclude with a section on how in Heart Gold Soul Silver, according to Bulbapedia at one time, Brock's Rhyhorn had Sturdy, which it's not legally supposed to have. However, looking at Bulbapedia nowadays shows you that Rhyhorn does indeed not have Sturdy, and we've even tested and confirmed this. This error existed on Bulbapedia for like a decade, and I'd love to do a deep dive into this and other long-standing errors, where they came from, how they got found out. Very interesting, but it's outside the scope of this video, so if you want to see a video like that, let me know. But that's all for this video. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Take care.